So this is the third part of your lecture for KIN 225 for January 27th. This graph shows a review of what happens to the muscle membrane charge during muscle contraction. So this review exercise involves labeling the graph with these different terms. So the first thing that happens here is this is at rest. Your muscle membrane charge is minus 70. Recall that you have more potassium that leaks out of the membrane at rest, and you have just a little bit of sodium that leaks in. And so because potassium is a positively charged ion and a lot of it's leaking out, you have a resting membrane charge that's negative on the membrane of the muscle fiber. So during contraction, when you get that action potential going from the neuron and the axon to the muscle fiber membrane, you get the acetylcholine that binds with the acetylcholine receptors. That causes opening of sodium channels. So sodium is going to rush into the muscle fiber. So I'm going to, what I'm going to do here is with this exercise, I'm going to click this box and move it over here. So you get influx of sodium. Sorry, that's the wrong box. I'm going to click on this one here. You get influx of sodium during this portion. So you have this positive charge coming into the muscle fiber, and so the membrane becomes more positively charged. And that is called, it's not repolarization, it's called depolarization. So depolarization refers to the charge becoming more positive. Then you get reversal of the charge. So you get potassium leaving the muscle fiber. So the potassium leaves the muscle fiber, goes into the blood, and that is called repolarization. So you get efflux of potassium and you get this repolarization. Put that term there. Move this box up a bit. Oops. So you've got influx of sodium, charge becomes more positive, it's called depolarization. Then you get potassium leaving the muscle fiber, you get repolarization, the charge is becoming more negative. And then what happens is that too much potassium leaves. So it seems like the potassium channels don't close fast enough. And that little period there where the charge on the membrane goes more negative than usual is called hyperpolarization. And so during that time period, it becomes more difficult to generate a muscle contraction. So that's one thing that can lead to fatigue, is too much potassium leaving your muscle fiber. Eventually that's restored so that you get back to this resting membrane potential. So this is a bit of a summary here describing the action potential. So the action potential is a rapid alteration in membrane potential whereby the polarity across the membrane becomes reversed. So it goes from negative to positive. So the membrane depolarizes, goes from negative 70 millivolts to positive 40 millivolts, and then repolarizes. Repolarization refers to going back to negative. So depolarization is caused by the entry of sodium. Sodium is a positively charged ion, so you get an increase towards a positive charge. Repolarization, you get exit of potassium. Potassium is also positively charged. So you're losing a positive charge, so it's going back to negative. This happens right down the muscle fiber membrane. So you have this depolarization, repolarization, or positive and negative charges that go down the muscle fiber membrane. And that's that electrical charge that's propagated down the membrane, and eventually that goes down the T tubule. And this depolarization and repolarization occurs in both the muscle fiber membrane, but also in the neuron and the axon. The action potential propagation down the muscle fiber membrane, you initially get opening of the sodium channels and potassium channels due to binding of the acetylcholine. And then you get opening of adjacent channels on the muscle membrane due to spread of this electrical charge. So you get opening of sodium channels, more sodium rushing in, and then opening of potassium channels, more potassium rushing out, all along the membrane, going right down the T tubule until it gets to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So this diagram kind of shows a review of what happens. You get propagation of that electrical potential along the muscle fiber membrane. So if you can imagine, you have sodium coming in, then potassium going out, and then right next to it, you get sodium channels opening up again, sodium going in, potassium going out. That goes right along the muscle fiber membrane. So you get this positive and negative charge that changes across the membrane, right down the T tubule. That's transmitted to the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and that stimulates the opening of calcium channels. You get calcium released, binding to troponin, lifting of tropomyosin off the actin, allows myosin to bind with actin. So that's pretty much a summary of everything that's involved with muscle contraction. So this is just the last part of the lecture. I just have this, again, kind of a pandemic face mask kind of joke slide here. Someone improperly wearing a face mask on an airplane flight. This is a bit of a review, a bit of a preview of what happens during relaxation. So the question here is, what must happen with sodium and potassium during recovery? So recall that with contractions, sodium came in and potassium went out. So during recovery, you need to pump sodium out of the muscle fiber and potassium back in. So this is the reverse of what happened during contraction. The pumping of these ions across the muscle fiber membrane during recovery from contraction requires energy. So the question here is, what enzyme would be located at the sarcolemma? The sarcolemma refers to the muscle fiber membrane to facilitate this process. So the answer here would be ATPase. So the ATPase, is that enzyme that breaks down ATP and gives you energy. So the pumping of these ions across the membrane in recovery requires energy, so it requires the breakdown of ATP. So this ATPase is referred to as the sarcolemmal ATPase, just from where it's located at the muscle fiber membrane, the sarcolemma. It's also referred to as the sodium-potassium ATPase, or the sodium-potassium pump. So it pumps potassium back into the fiber and pumps sodium out of the fiber. So this is the reverse of what happens during muscle contraction. Last question I have for you here is, where in the muscle fiber would you find mitochondria, and why are they located here? And the answer here is that mitochondria are found wherever you find ATPase, so around myosin, the sarcoplasmic reticulum, or just under the sarcolemma. So in all these locations, you're using ATP. So at the myosin, you're using ATP to activate myosin to cause contraction. You know, myosin has to bind with actin, and you need breakdown of ATP. Sarcoplasmic reticulum, in recovery, you have to break down ATP to pump calcium back in. And then at the sarcolemma, you need to break down ATP in recovery to pump sodium out of the muscle fiber membrane and potassium back into the muscle fiber. So mitochondria are located in these areas because mitochondria are these organelles in your muscle fibers that produce ATP. So it makes sense that you have these powerhouses, the mitochondria in the muscle fibers that produce ATP at locations where you are using ATP. So mitochondria supply the energy or produce ATP. Therefore, it makes sense that they are located in areas where ATP is used. For example, the myosin head, the sarcoplasmic reticulum calcium pump, or the sarcolemmal sodium potassium pump.